to the north. When early explorers went into the Great Pyramid, they did not detect these shafts. They wouldn't have known that they were there. The only reason they were found was because a man in 1872 by the name of Wayman Dixon was in the chamber and detected a crack in the wall. He pushed a rod through that crack and he got no resistance on the rod. So he chiseled away the limestone, and lo and behold, behind that plate was the shafts. He did the similar thing on the northern face of the chamber and tapped around and found that there was another shaft there, chiseled out the limestone, there it was. These were intentional designs. They did not cut these shafts and then just put a plug in them at the Queen's Chamber. They were a part of the original block. So the question is, why? Why did they do that? In 1993, a German robotics engineer by the name of Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a robot up the southern shaft. When he got to the end of the shaft, it terminated at what is called a so-called door. But the question is, was it really a door? And my answer is no, it was not a door. It was just a plate of limestone. Through this limestone were two copper fittings. So these were really mysterious. And why would they put copper fittings at the end of this shaft? The solution in the Giza power plant is that there were actually electrodes and determined when the shaft was full of the chemical they were using and mixing to create hydrogen. Now you might ask, why was the shaft closed at the end? So we have a shaft that's closed in two places, terminated 5 inches away from the chamber at the bottom and with a plate of limestone at the top. Certainly it wasn't for the passage of air for people to breathe. And even though you may ask that, why would a mummy or a pharaoh need to breathe if he was dead? So that was another mysterious question that we had to answer. So the Giza power plant theory actually proposes that both of these shafts contain different chemicals. A hydrated zinc solution and a diluted hydrochloric acid solution. These two chemicals, if mixed, would actually boil off hydrogen. The evidence to support that proposition was found actually on the walls of the shaft and inside the southern shaft. On the walls of the shaft, early explorers found that they were covered with salt, up to 1 inch thick. They have subsequently cleaned off the salt, but the salt was there. And that would be the result of hydrogen gas boiling off and giving up some of the impurities in the gas to the limestone. So the evidence for hydrogen is there. The evidence that a liquid was contained in those shafts is very strong. If you consider that a 5-inch plate of limestone, a liquid would percolate through it, whereas it would not pass air. In the east wall is a niche. The niche is corbelled. I propose that it had an evaporator tower there, so that the chemicals that came into the chamber were actually wicked up into this evaporator tower and gave off the hydrogen. So let's climb along the horizontal passage again, and we'll go to the bottom of the Grand Gallery. The Grand Gallery is 82 inches wide at the bottom and 42 inches wide at the top, and 28 feet high. It's quite an impressive masterpiece. I propose that within the slots, the 27 pair of slots going along the length of the Grand Gallery, were resonators, a series of resonators that actually, coupled with the pyramid, drew the vibration and converted it to airborne sound at different frequencies. In other words, at the bottom you would have a larger resonator and stepping up to higher frequencies as you got to the top. In 1999, I noticed evidence that these resonators actually were there. And that evidence is on the walls and the ceiling of the Grand Gallery. Because in the past, in the history, there was a disaster, a huge disaster. And what happened was I propose that it was either a comet strike or some external force struck the planet. This caused all this destruction that we find around us and what we have talked about as we have gone around the Giza Plateau. The cracked blocks, things thrown and jumbled all over the place, are the signs of a cataclysm many thousands of years ago. Inside the Great Pyramid, the evidence of that cataclysm is around the King's Chamber and the Grand Gallery, with the use of hydrogen, and also if you have the introduction of oxygen after the casing stones are stripped off, you would probably have the conditions, the right conditions for that hydrogen to explode. The evidence is inside the chamber. The walls were actually pushed out over an inch. The ceiling beams were pushed up and they were cracked. So what we had was an explosion, the walls were pushed out, the ceiling beams lifted slightly, they fell down and cracked along the south side. Also in that chamber, the sarcophagus, or the granite box, is a different color than the rest of the granite. It is a chocolate brown color. And I propose that that too was a result of this explosion, that the granite box, originally a pink Aswan granite, was subject to tremendous forces and heat. And as a result, it's literally cooked like in an oven, changing the color of the granite. If we go back out through the antechamber and onto the Great Step, and if we look at the ceiling of the Grand Gallery, we will see the evidence of that explosion. The walls of the Grand Gallery have the evidence of a tremendous force, tremendous heat. And I'm not the first one to notice this. There have been architects and engineers who have been there and say that the walls are vitrified. The evidence is there to support the Giza power plant theory. And also the design of the resonators, because on the ceiling you have these scorch marks, very, very deep scorch marks. The scorch marks weren't very visible until the pyramid was closed for a year and they actually cleaned it. And those scorch marks then became very, very clear. And what we have are two scorch marks, a pair of scorch marks on both sides on the ceiling. Also along the wall there are scorch marks that form a line, or the the blast pattern seems to form a line down, centered with the slots. So all this evidence comes together. But to sum it up, let me explain everything and how it worked. We start out with energy. That energy is the energy of the Earth. Seismic energy, vibration, feeding through the Great Pyramid. We collect that energy in the Grand Gallery and convert it to airborne sound. That sound and the natural design, or the design of the Grand Gallery, is such that any sound generated in the Grand Gallery will focus through that small horizontal passage into the King's Chamber. There, the sound actually builds and accumulates. It affects the hydrogen in the area, and then you have a microwave signal coming in from the universe, the the signature of the Big Bang is actually a hydrogen signature at 21 centimeters. So there we have it. The evidence of a sophisticated, intelligent, brilliant society that created energy not in a way that is harmful to the Earth or the people that live on it, but energy that resonated, that was in harmony with the Earth. Generating the energy, they did it with harmony with the Earth and drove the Earth into harmony. We've just scratched the surface, though. I believe there is much more that needs to be found and discovered in Egypt about this lost civilization. We'll keep looking.